Hello and welcome to Echoes of Doubt, Episode 2, Project Blue Book, the government's definitely not aliens UFO files. For more than 20 years, the United States government stared at the sky like a cat seeing a laser pointer for the first time. They took reports of unidentified flying objects, glowing saucers, fast blips on radar, and things shaped suspiciously like dinner plates, and tried to figure what is going on. Was it a threat to national security? Perhaps it was aliens. Or was it just a bunch of guys in the country who were allegedly misidentifying Venus after 6 beers? Well, whatever it was, they called the investigation of these Project Blue Book, which sounds super mysterious, but is basically Cold War code for we're pretending to take this seriously. Today, on Echoes of Doubt, we're cracking open the dusty Air Force filing cabinet that I'm going to label absolutely not extraterrestrials, so please stop asking. Let's begin. The government starts looking up, like way, way up. All the way back on June 24th, 1947, Kenneth Arnold, a mild-mannered Idaho businessman and amateur pilot, took off in his 𝐻𝐫𝐢𝐸 A2 plane, expecting nothing more than a routine flight over the Cascade Mountains. But what he got instead was a front-row seat to history, and a lifetime of explaining what the hell did I just see. Anyways, while flying near Mount Rainier, Arnold reported seeing 9, that's right, 9, shiny crescent-shaped objects flying in formation at blistering speeds. He estimated at over 1,200 miles per hour. Now this was in 1947, mind you, when fast meant a propeller plane that didn't fall apart mid-flight. Now he described their movement as similar to a saucer skipping across the water, which the press, in its usual game of telephone, quickly warped into flying saucers. And just like that, folks, a legend, no, an entire genre of tinfoil hat theories was born. Arnold, to his credit, wasn't looking to become the messiah of UFO believers everywhere. He was just trying to report something weird that he couldn't explain. But instead of a thank you card from science, he got ridicule, public scrutiny, and a swarm of conspiracy enthusiasts clinging to him like flies on a government cover-up. Now, despite being a relatively credible witness and experienced pilot, clear weather, daylight sighting, his story was met with a mix of fascination, skepticism, and that's speaking from both Project Sign, the Air Force's first real UFO investigation, and a decades-long cultural obsession. Now, whether you believe Arnold saw extraterrestrial visitors, special secret military aircraft, or just some highly confused Canadian geese, one thing's for sure, the guy just wanted to get home for dinner, not trigger the modern UFO craze. But hey, history has a funny way of picking its profits. And just like that, the term flying saucer was officially born. Thank you, Kenneth. Now every alien meme has you to thank. Props. Then, because the universe has a dark sense of humor, we get the Roswell incident, where the Army first says, "Bro, we found a saucer." And then literally 2 seconds later goes, wait, sorry, my bad, weather balloon. Enter Project Sign, which became Project Grudge, and finally the piece de resistance of bureaucratic UFO curiosity, Project Blue Book, was launched in 1952. Led by none other than Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, who was like, let's take this seriously. Kind of, unless someone higher up tells us to stop. So what even was Project Blue Book? Well, let's dig into it. Project Blue Book was the U.S. Air Force's grand attempt to make sense of this UFO craze that had taken hold of the American psyche, or at least pretend to look into things. It was launched in 1952 and apparently running until 1969. It was the third and most infamous of the U.S. Air Force's UFO investigations, following the half-hearted efforts of Project Sign and Project Grudge, which, if nothing else, had great names for some metal bands, bro. Blue Book was supposed to bring scientific rigor to the increasingly bizarre reports of strange lights, flying discs, and saucer-shaped objects darting across the sky like piloted by some cosmic pranksters. And at the helm was Captain Edward J. Ruppelt. We'll get into his big details later. For now, you just need to know he was a decorated World War II veteran and aeronautical engineer who had the radical idea of actually taking witnesses seriously, at least until his suggestions made the brass really uncomfortable. Under Ruppelt's leadership, the project took a more systematic and scientific approach, not like its predecessors. He even coined the term unidentified flying object to replace the lame flying saucer. Probably because saying saucers made him feel like he was managing a dishware inventory instead of unexplained aerial phenomenon. Forward, Blue Book investigated over 12,000 UFO reports, and while many were chalked up to weather balloons, aircraft, stars, or that old favorite temperature inversions, allegedly, a small percentage of cases remained stubbornly unexplained, much to the chagrin of officials who really just wanted this whole thing to go away. As the Cold War raged on, Blue Book became a delicate, balancing act, sort of like investigate just enough to placate public curiosity, but not so much that people would start thinking little green men were flying over D.C. And in fact, one of the most iconic incidents it faced was the 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO flap. Again, we'll get into that later, where operators, pilots, and other presumably sober adults saw glowing objects swarm the capital's airspace. The official explanation? Weather. Because, of course, weather frequently travels in tight formation and outmaneuvers our fighter jets. Anyways, after Ruppelt left in 1953, the project fell into the hands of officers less enthusiastic about uncovering the cosmic secrets and more committed to debunking every report as quickly and blandly as possible. Enter the infamous swamp gas excuse, used in 1966 to explain sightings in Michigan, courtesy of scientific consultant Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Now, Dr. Hynek, who later regretted it so much he spent the rest of his career making up for it by becoming one of the leading advocates for serious UFO study. Allegedly, this was not swamp gas, but by the time Project Blue Book was shut down in 1969, after the Condon report, again we'll get into that later, declared the UFOs were not a threat to national security, but offer no scientific value, it had investigated 12,618 cases. However, 701 of those cases are officially unexplained. Now, the Air Force closed the books, metaphorically patted the public on the head, and said there's nothing to see here. But for many, Project Blue Book was less about solving the mystery of UFOs and more about managing the narrative. Still, it left behind a fascinating legacy. Hundreds of pages of declassified documents, a generation of curious minds, and a pop culture gold mine. It may not have found aliens, but it definitely proved that the truth was out there, buried under red tape and weather balloons. Now, on to the details of the Condon Report. The Condon Report, officially titled Scientific Study of Unidentified Flying Objects, is perhaps best described as the bureaucratic mic drop the U.S. government used to wash its hands of the UFO problem, preferably with industrial-strength soap, and a sigh of relief. Commissioned in 1966 and led by physicist Dr. Edward U. Condon, the study was supposed to be the definitive scientific investigation into UFO phenomenon. But let's be honest, from the start, it felt less like a quest for the truth and more like a carefully choreographed dance to prove that there was nothing to worry about. Conducted under the University of Colorado with funding from the U.S. Air Force, the report took about 2 years, over $1 million, and 1,485 pages to say, in essence, yeah, we looked, there's nothing to see here, stop asking. Now, to give credit where it's due, the Condon Committee did investigate around 90 UFO cases and included contributions from real scientists and investigators. But the internal drama made it more like the X-Files meets a faculty meeting gone horribly wrong. Several staff members, including the now legendary Dr. J. Allen Hynek and investigator David Saunders, raised a lot of red flags early on, alleging that Condon had already made up his mind before the study ever even began. And it's hard to argue otherwise when Condon, who admitted he had little interest in UFOs, was actually quoted in 1967 saying the whole subject was nonsense. That's like hiring a vegetarian to write a nice report on the best barbecue joints in Texas. I mean, for real. When the report was finally published in 1968, it concluded that UFOs showed no evidence of being a threat to national security, and it offered zero value to science, and therefore it did not warrant further government investigation. That was music to the Air Force's ears, which quickly used the report as justification to shutter Blue Book in 1969. But here's the kicker. Buried in that sprawling document were several cases that were in fact, even under Condon, still unexplained. Some credible witnesses, some radar confirmation. Apparently those weren't quite exciting enough to warrant a follow-up. It's a bit like a doctor telling you everything looks fine while ignoring the x-ray showing your legs on backwards. Critics pointed out that Condon report felt less like scientific inquiry and more like a pre-written conclusion with some case studies tacked on for appearances. Yet despite the skepticism, the report was widely accepted in academic and military circles, effectively slamming the door on official United States government UFO investigations for decades. But instead of silencing curiosity, it just drove it underground, or rather to late-night radio shows, documentaries, and every single History Channel series involving a man who has Sonic the Hedgehog's porcupine hair yelling about aliens. Nothing but love for you. In the end, the Condon Report did accomplish one thing brilliantly. It showed how a scientific study can look thorough, sound authoritative, and still leave everyone arguing about aliens, even 50 years later. So while it may not have solved the mystery of UFOs, it definitely reinforced one of life's greatest truths. If you don't want to find something, you probably won't. Now, we're actually going to move past the Condon reports and get into how America lost its mind with extraterrestrial style. Now, meanwhile, back on Earth, the 1950s and 60s were the golden age of everyone is paranoid and no one knows how telescopes even work. Nuclear weapons, Sputnik, sci-fi movies where aliens always land in cornfields, but never in front of an actual scientist. A movie clip from a 1950s movie, it came from the skies. It's a blob, or a flying something. Why is no one wearing pants? Public UFO sightings exploded, and so did the public's patience. In a statement released by journalist Rob Jamieson, Blue Book became a lightning rod. People wanted answers, preferably the kind involving little green men. Instead, they got paperwork. During its nearly 2-decade run from 1952 to 1969, Project Blue Book became the U.S. Air Force's favorite way of saying, we're totally looking into those UFO things. Just don't expect us to find anything too interesting. But despite its mission to investigate, and let's be honest, explain away unidentified flying object reports, several cases slipped through the cracks that were just too weird, too credible, or too radar confirmed to be easily dismissed. These cases, still studied and debated today, represent the closest the government ever got to saying, well, this is awkward. Now fast forward to 2017, when the Pentagon goes, oh yeah, by the way, we've been studying UFOs this whole time again. But now we call them UAPs because that sounds more adult. This is how they revealed the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, also known as Project ATIP, and dropped some declassified footage of Navy pilots like Commander David Fravor losing their collective minds at TikToks doing some space ballet. So, what is Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program again? ATIP. The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, God, who names these, was a secretive initiative run by the United States Department of Defense from 2007 to approximately 2012. It was designed to investigate reports of unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAPs, what the public more commonly refers to as UFOs. The program was first revealed to the public late in 2017 through investigative reporting by the New York Times, which disclosed that ATIP had operated with a $22 million budget, quietly tucked into the Pentagon's overall spending, thanks largely to the efforts of Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid of Nevada, who had a long-standing interest in the subject. 𝐴TIP was directed by military intelligence official Luis Elizondo, who later resigned in frustration over what he perceived as the government's failure to take the issue seriously. Under Elizondo's leadership, the program investigated numerous credible military sightings of unknown craft, some of which were captured in the now famous infrared videos like the Gimbal, Go Fast, and FLIR 1 footage released by the Department of Defense, and even confirmed as authentic. People should have lost their shit at this point. These videos show unidentified objects executing flight maneuvers well beyond the known capabilities of any publicly known aircraft, which raised questions about their origin and intent. The program also delved into theoretical technologies, including anti-gravity propulsion, wormholes, and even studies on human encounters with anomalous phenomenon. Although officially shut down in 2012, 𝐴TIP's legacy continued through successor programs and increasing government transparency on the UAP issue. Its existence helped push the Pentagon into acknowledging that UAPs are real, prompting congressional hearings, the establishment of All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, and public statements from military officials admitting that some encounters remain unexplained. 𝐴TIP marked a turning point in the U.S. government's approach to UFOs, moving from decades of denial to cautious recognition that something unexplained and pretty advanced is operating in American airspace. Currently, we still have AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Good Lord! Which is exactly the kind of bureaucratic name you give something you're definitely not hiding aliens in, allegedly. Now, the Advanced All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office was officially established by the United States Department of Defense in July of 2022 as a direct response to growing public and congressional concern over unidentified aerial phenomenon, or UAPs. Especially following years of military encounters and the controversial revelations from the earlier advanced, we'll just say 𝐴TIP, AARO was created under the directive of the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act, with the mission to synchronize efforts across all the departments of defense and U.S. intelligence community to detect, identify, analyze, and when necessary, mitigate threats from anomalous objects in all domains: air, sea, space, and even transmedium, which is objects that transition between those domains. Led initially by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, a physicist and seasoned intelligence official, AARO sought to bring scientific rigor and institutional transparency to the historically opaque topic of UAPs. The office was tasked with investigating not just aerial phenomena, but also unknowns in space and underwater domains, signaling a more expansive approach, more than the past efforts. In a significant milestone, AARO published its first public report in 2023, revealing that while most of the 510 analyzed UAP cases had conventional explanations, however, a small percentage again remained unsolved and exhibited characteristics such as extreme maneuverability, Lack of visible propulsion. Wow. The agency has also implemented a secure reporting system. Finally, to encourage military personnel and government contractors to submit sightings without the fear of stigma, which kept so many pilots over the years in the dark. Now by 2024, AARO began declassifying certain findings and even participated in public congressional hearings, further legitimizing the UAP discussion. The office represents the most coordinated and transparent effort in the U.S. history to investigate unexplained phenomenon, reflecting a shift from secrecy to scientific inquiry. Though it is yet to confirm the presence of extraterrestrial technology and/or beings, AARO has become central to the U.S. government's evolving and increasingly serious approach to UAPs. Now, we're about to get hella deep and detailed into my favorite and top cases of Project Blue Book that live on in our minds. Number 1. The 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO flap. That's a mouthful. The night the skies over the Capitol got really, really weird. The 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO flap wasn't just another lights in the sky moment. It was a full-blown, multi-night, radar-confirmed aerial mystery that unfolded over the most secure airspace in the United States. If aliens were trying to make a point, it seems like they were saying, "Hey, we know where you live." The event kicked off on the night of Saturday, July 19th, 1952, and continued into the early morning hours of July 20th, when air traffic controllers at Washington National Airport noticed several unidentified blips on the radar screens. These objects were moving erratically, zigzagging, stopping mid-air, accelerating to estimated speeds on radar over 7,000 miles per hour. And for those of you that don't know how fast that is, we'll just call it Mach Jesus. And generally behaving like they had no respect for either gravity or FAA regulations. The radar blips weren't just a one-screen anomaly. Controllers at Andrews Air Force Base also detected the same objects on their own radar, and both groups verified their equipment was functioning perfectly. This wasn't a ghost in the machine. It was a dozen or so UAPs, playing tag over the nation's capital. As if it wasn't unnerving enough, commercial pilots flying in the area began radioing in visual confirmations of the glowing lights and strange objects darting through the sky. One pilot even remarked that the lights were unlike anything he had ever seen, coming from a guy whose job was literally to fly through the sky. That should have meant something. Now, as sightings piled up, the military responded in the most predictable fashion. Fighter jets were scrambled because nothing says we've got all of this under control like trying to intercept a gravity-defying, mysterious light in the sky with our 1950s jet technology. But as soon as the jets arrived, the UFOs just vanished from radar, like they were politely waiting for the humans, so when they leave, we can sneak right back and do whatever it is that we want to do. Or whatever glowing aerial phenomenon do for some kind of fun. When the jets returned to base, the UFOs, they returned. Now this either meant they were playing some kind of interstellar prank, or had a better understanding of air defense patterns than we would care to admit. A week later, just as things began to calm down, the whole phenomenon repeated itself. July 26 through 27. There were more radar hits, more visual sightings, and again, scramble of more fighter jets. Once again, the mysterious objects vanished when pursued. The Air Force was now in full-blown damage control mode, with public anxiety growing about these headlines, screaming about flying saucers over the White House. This led to the now infamous press conference on July 29, 1952, with Air Force Major General John A. Samford. At the time, he was Director of Intelligence, holding what was then the largest Pentagon press conference since World War II had ended. The official explanation? Temperature inversions. Bruh. That's right, an atmospheric condition that allegedly caused radar to bounce off warm air and reflect ground objects into the sky. Convenient, huh? The idea that multiple trained radar operators, multiple pilots, and control tower staff all simultaneously interpreting ground objects or stars at high speed as aerial phenomena being, well, creative. It's the kind of explanation that makes you wonder if the Air Force's real plan was just to see how many syllables they could string together before the press just gave up. Some Air Force insiders, including Captain Edward J. Ruppelt from Black Book, then the head of Project Blue Book nonetheless, they were not convinced. Ruppelt would later describe the event as one of the most puzzling and even the most well-documented UFO incidents in Blue Book's files. Period. Let's be clear. That man had seen it all, from swamp gas to it's probably just a flock of birds. Even Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the scientific consultant for Blue Book, and at this time, mind you, still a die-hard skeptic, was left scratching his head. Years later, both Ruppelt and Hynek admitted that the temperature inversion theory felt more like a PR bandage than serious scientific conclusion. In total, the Washington flap involved over 300 eyewitness accounts, multiple radar systems, 2 separate nights, and military responses, and the scrambling of F-94 interceptor jets. And yet the final verdict was essentially, don't worry folks, just another warm night in D.C. The event didn't just ignite panic, it invited public interest in UFOs. Hell, it exploded it. Civilian UFO groups saw their membership surge. Congressional interest briefly spiked. Even President Harry Truman reportedly asked for an explanation, though he didn't get much more than anyone else. In the end, 1952 Washington UFO flap remains one of the most well-documented and confounding incidents in the history of American UFO sightings. It had everything: radar confirmation, pilot testimonies, physical maneuvering beyond the capabilities of any known craft at the time, or even thereafter, and a public relations response that boiled down to, trust me bro, it was just weather. If it was a hoax, it was an elaborate one, orchestrated by the clouds, the stars, the temperature, the sky, and atmospheric mischief. If it was real, well, that's just something the Air Force would rather not talk about. Now, we are moving on to number 2, the Ꞌleveland Incident, 1957, where UFOs and cars apparently don't mix. The Ꞌleveland Incident of 1957 is hands down one of the most bizarre, well-documented, and hilariously hand-waved UFO cases in American history. If there was ever a night when extraterrestrials were cruising Texas highways looking to short-circuit every car in sight, November 2nd, 1957 was it. The scene unfolded in and around Ꞌleveland, Texas, a rural town where roads are long, the skies are big, and the strangest thing you normally expect to see is a stubborn cow blocking the traffic. Again. Move it along, heifer. That night, however, multiple independent witnesses, ranging from truck drivers and farmers to respected law enforcement, reported close encounters with a glowing, oval or cigar-shaped object that hovered low to the ground or appeared to even land on the rural highways. Each encounter was accompanied by a very specific symptom: total electrical failure. Engines would stall, headlights died, radios went fully silent. As soon as the object zoomed off into the night sky, everything powered back on, as if nothing even happened. Coincidence? Maybe. Cosmic prank? Possibly. Alien EMP field test? That's one fun theory. These reports began around 10:30 p.m. when a truck driver named Pedro Saucedo and his friend were driving northeast of Ꞌleveland. They saw a blue flash and then a tornado-shaped object rapidly approaching. As it passed overhead, their truck engine died and only restarted after the object disappeared. They were so spooked, Saucedo ran to the sheriff's office to file a report. Naturally, it was initially met with laughter and skepticism, until more reports, however, started pouring in. Over the next few hours, at least 15 separate incidents were reported from locations across a whole 10-mile radius. Descriptions of the object were eerily consistent: large, bright, glowing, often pulsating with light, and causing car trouble wherever it went. Believe it or not, among the witnesses was the sheriff himself, Weir Clem, who was called out to investigate after the first few reports. At one point, police officer A.J. Fowler took multiple calls from panicked residents describing similar scenes: hovering lights, dead engines, and a mysterious glowing shape. Some witnesses even claimed that the object was as big as a bus or even a house and was just hovering silently above the ground. One college student said the object appeared to be 200 feet long, glowing red, and as soon as it approached his car, everything died until the thing zipped away. The U.S. Air Force, now deep into Project Blue Book, decided to investigate. They sent investigator James Clarkson to interview witnesses. Sounds promising, right? Well, Clarkson arrived after most of the witnesses had already been dismissed by local officials, or frankly, were too weirded out to keep repeating themselves. The Air Force spent all of one whole day investigating what was arguably one of the most compelling mass UFO reports in U.S. history at that time. Their conclusion? The cause of the sightings and the electrical failures was likely ball lightning or St. Elmo's fire, both of which are very rare atmospheric phenomena that, while real, are increasingly rare and have never been demonstrated to stall car engines en masse, much less follow roads and hover over vehicles like they were shopping for a Buick. Let's be clear, ball lightning is still one of science's greatest maybe phenomenon. It is described as a glowing orb of energy, sometimes bouncing or floating, but it has never been shown to cause large-scale electromagnetic interference or mimic intelligent flight. And as for St. Elmo's fire, while it's freaking spooky looking, it is a plasma discharge often found on ship masts or airplane wings, not typically floating above Texas highways in the middle of the night like it's late for a barbecue. But that didn't stop Project Blue Book from confidently marking the case as explained. Despite the weak conclusions, many UFO researchers and even some skeptical scientists have since called the Levelland incident one of the most compelling UFO cases on record, due to the sheer number of independent witnesses, credible reporting, and the direct physical effects that they observed. Unlike blurry photos or tall tales told around a campfire, Levelland gave us hard data, simultaneous reports across a broad area of 10 miles, uniform descriptions of all object, and repeated electrical interference with modern vehicles. It's basically a UFO researcher's dream, but it was the military's worst PR nightmare. In the end, the Levelland incident stands as one of the clearest examples of something flying around that night with the ability to interact with physical systems, travel intelligently, and confuse the living daylights out of everyone who saw it. Of course, the official record will still tell you that it was the weather acting up, because if there's anything we've learned from decades of UFO investigations, it's that mysterious, glowing objects that shut down cars, terrify police and locals, and hover in the sky are probably just Mother Nature having a glitch. On to number 3, the 𝔻𝕝𝕬𝕤𝕚 incident of 1964, where a cop meets the saucer. The 𝔻𝕝𝕬𝕤𝕚 incident of 1964 is one of the most compelling and enduring UFO encounters ever investigated, not just because it involved a credible witness, but physical evidence and detailed descriptions, but because even Project Blue Book, the U.S. Air Force's explanation, let's find a boring explanation for everything UFO investigation team, couldn't figure out what the hell happened. On April 24, 1964, in the dusty outskirts of Socorro, New Mexico, police officer 𝔻𝕝𝕬𝕚, a well-respected and level-headed man with a solid reputation and zero history of chasing flying saucers, found himself in the kind of situation that would turn a slow patrol shift to a career-defining headache. Not paperwork. Around 5:45 p.m., Zamora was chasing a speeding car, because crime never sleeps, especially in the desert, when he suddenly heard a loud roaring sound, not unlike a jet engine, but far too close for comfort. He also spotted a flame in the sky, descending toward the ground. Assuming it was an explosion or accident at the nearby dynamite shack, because, small town New Mexico has one of those casually happening, he broke off the pursuit and drove towards the source of the explosion. That's when things got weird. From a ridge just south of Socorro, Zamora observed a shiny, oval-shaped object about the size of a small car sitting in a gully. The craft had 4 landing legs extended, and a strange insignia on the side, resembling an inverted V with 3 lines across it. Standing beside the object were 2 small humanoid figures, dressed in what he described as white coveralls. Before Zamora could get too close, or ask for their license or registration, they noticed him, quickly entered the craft, and that's when the show really began. The object emitted a loud roar, lifted off the ground with a blue-orange flame shooting out from beneath it. It then ascended rapidly into the sky, knocking over some brush and leaving behind burn marks, scorched vegetation, and impressions in the soil where the landing gear had been. That's wild. The roar was so loud and sudden that Zamora instinctively dove behind his patrol car, because whatever it wasn't waiting around to file a flight plan. Once the object flew off into the distance, Zamora radioed the incident in and returned to the site, where the other officers, including Sergeant Sam Chavez, soon joined him. Here's where things got juicy. Multiple sets of physical evidence were found. There were 4 symmetrical impressions in the ground, matching the landing gear, burn marks, and charred shrubs consistent with a high-heat exhaust. This wasn't a case of maybe he saw a weather balloon, U.S. government, or mistook Venus for another space shift. There were literal scorched earth. Even more notably, other civilians came forward claiming they saw an object in the sky at exactly the same time, though their reports were quietly swept under the rug in the official version of events. Enter Project Blue Book, and to their credit, this one they actually took seriously. They dispatched investigators, analyzed the physical evidence, even interviewed Zamora extensively, and even brought Dr. J. Allen Hynek, their usual scientific consultant who had made a career of explaining UFOs as swamp gas, temperature inversions, or overexcited imaginations. But even Hynek was stumped. He found Zamora to be quite credible, the physical evidence consistent with his account, and no sign at all of a hoax, a prank, or experimental aircraft test gone rogue. In fact, no aircraft in 1964 was capable of the near-silent vertical takeoff and landing that Zamora had described. Certainly not one that left behind blast marks and then took off with so much as a sonic boom, even though achieving sonic speed. As pressure mounted for an explanation, theories were floated, ranging from experimental NASA lunar landers, because nothing says covert operation like testing near a police officer with a radio, to weather phenomena, of course, to hallucinations, because obviously seasoned police officers hallucinate in 4K with ground impressions. The Air Force, clearly uncomfortable with leaving something officially unexplained, danced around the subject for years, before eventually filing the Zamora case under unresolved, which in Blue Book speak basically meant, we give up. Now, Lonnie Zamora himself never changed his story. He did not write books, give flashy interviews, or try to monetize his encounter. In fact, he actively avoided the media and seemed to regret all the attention, which is the opposite of what you'd expect if he was making this up. He maintained until his death in 2009 that what he saw was real, unexplainable, and clearly not from this earth, or, at the very least, not from anywhere the U.S. military was admitting to. To this day, the Lonnie Zamora incident remains one of the most credible, well-documented, and mystifying cases in UFO history. It involved a trained observer, corroborating evidence, a multi-agency investigation, and physical traces that defy conventional explanation. But if you don't check official records, don't expect much. Apparently, all the facts in the world still can't compete with the government's favorite strategy. Look over there! It's probably a weather balloon. Allegedly. Now on to number 4, the RB-47 radar visual incident of 1957. We see it, we track it, we still don't know what the hell it was. So, the RB-47 radar visual incident is often considered the gold standard of UFO encounters. If gold came with 3 radar confirmations, visual sightings by multiple trained Air Force officers, and a total inability for the U.S. military to explain just what the hell was in the sky that night. This wasn't just one guy in a pickup truck claiming that the mothership spoke to him. This was a fully crewed U.S. Air Force electronic reconnaissance jet loaded with top secret surveillance gear, crewed by elite officers, being buzzed by a craft that outmaneuvered it like it was standing still. Now you would think that would be worth more than a footnote in UFO history. But alas, Project Blue Book had weather balloons and Venus to blame for everything. So this one got the bureaucratic shrug as well. Damn. It all began in the early morning hours of July 17th, 1957, as an Air Force RB-47H, a variant of the B-47 Stratojet, outfitted for electronic intelligence, or ELINT, took off from Forbes Air Force Base in Topeka, Kansas, bound for Gulfport, Mississippi. On board were 6 highly trained officers, including 3 electronic warfare specialists, which were operating sophisticated detection and jamming gear. Gear that could pick up radar and electronic emissions from miles away. In short, this was not your average sightseeing flight. These guys were professionals, trained to detect Soviet radar, jam enemy signals, and analyze airborne electronic anomalies, not chase random lights in the sky. Somewhere near Mississippi, the onboard ECM, or electronic countermeasures, gear detected a radar-emitting source, a pulsing signal in the S-band radar range that was moving in an unusual pattern. They weren't picking up a ground radar station. This source was airborne and moving with the plane. As the aircraft banked and changed course, the signal moved with them, mirroring them. At first, the crew thought it might be an anomaly, maybe a glitch in their equipment, but things escalated when the co-pilot visually spotted a bright, glowing light described as an intense bluish-white object off the wing of the plane. Now, it wasn't just an electronic signal. It had a face, and it was very, very interested in their jet. This object began pacing the RB-47 for hundreds of miles. Again, hundreds of miles. Sometimes it was ahead of them, sometimes off to the side. At one point, it vanished from radar, only to reappear on radar miles ahead of the plane that it was just next to, seemingly waiting for them to catch up, as if it had nothing better to do than taunt America's best technology of the time. The crew, now fully alert and probably wondering if they'd taken a wrong turn to the outer limits, they reported that the object moved with precision, responded to their movements, and even changed position in midair without any means of known propulsion. It was fast, really fast, and whatever it wasn't showing up on any known air traffic registry. They checked. Even more concerning, ground radar at multiple Air Force installations, including one in Texas, confirmed they were tracking the same unknown object, validating what the crew was seeing, detecting the same movements, and detecting it on the board. So let's recap. We now have a radar visual electronic encounter with aerial object confirmation from both the aircraft and ground stations, tracked across multiple states, involving highly trained military personnel, even classified surveillance equipment. Basically, if it wasn't a UFO, we don't know what it was. And yet, when Project Blue Book reviewed the case, they did what they did best: fumble it like a hot potato. Their conclusion: they never formally investigated it. Yes, despite the overwhelming evidence and credible sources, the Air Force simply moved on. Probably after deciding they didn't need the headache of explaining how something could fly rings around a spy plane without wings, rotors, or even a tail number. In later interviews, Major Dewey Fournet, a Pentagon liaison for Project Blue Book, admitted the case was one of the most disturbing and inexplicable encounters he ever came across. Again, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the Air Force's resident scientific consultant and initially a staunch skeptic, acknowledged this was one of the few truly unexplainable cases in the Blue Book files. Skeptics, of course, have tried their best to brush it off. Some said it might have been ground radar bounce, even though the radar was airborne and corroborated from multiple sources. Others suggested it was a secret military project, because the Air Force loves to test top-secret crafts in front of their own planes during Cold War surveillance missions. And a few even claimed it might have been civilian aircraft. Or, here we go again, weather anomaly, because yes, glowing, pulsing objects that outpace jets at Mach Jesus speeds are often just rogue weather balloons doing their thing. The RB-47 incident remains one of the most thoroughly documented UFO cases in military history. It had multiple expert witnesses, synchronized radar and electronic detection, visual sightings from multiple officers, and flight behavior no known aircraft could replicate in 1957. Hell, arguably even today. And yet, it lives in the archives as just another interesting blip. It's as if the official stance was, sure, we were tailed by a high-speed, intelligent craft across the entire southern United States, but let's not make a big deal about it. After all, it might hurt public morale, or for worse, the Air Force's budget. So, in summary, the RB-47 incident wasn't just an unexplained blip on a radar screen. It was full-on technological game of cat and mouse between a Cold War spy plane and something else. Something smarter, faster, and apparently immune to military protocol. But don't worry, folks. It was probably just weather with a friggin' jetpack. And finally, closing the top cases, I think, from Blue Book Files, number 5, the Lubbock Lights, 1951. A V formation that would make the Blue Angels jealous. The Lubbock Lights incident of 1951 is one of those UFO stories that managed to snag the attention of not only small-town Texas, but also the scientific community. mostly because it involved a group of serious, no-nonsense university professors who suddenly found themselves staring up at the sky, wondering if they'd accidentally stumbled on a low-budget sci-fi movie. On the night of August 25th, 1951, a handful of Texas Tech University professors, not the kind of folks who usually chase after flying saucers, were gathered in the backyard of a Lubbock, Texas home, chatting about physics and probably lamenting their lack of air conditioning, when they noticed something very strange: a formation of glowing bluish white lights moving silently across the sky in a precise V-shaped formation. Now, if you're picturing a squadron of alien drones doing a nocturnal flyover, you're not far off. The professors included Dr. 𝐻𝐴𝐸𝐿𝐴, Dr. W.L. Ducker, and Dr. Carl Hart, Jr. They were immediately intrigued and grabbed what cameras they had, because when you see mysterious lights that don't fit any known aircraft or atmospheric phenomenon, the natural reaction is to whip out your camera and start shooting. Carl Hart Jr., a 17-year-old college student with an affinity for photography, managed to capture a series of remarkable black and white photos that showed several glowing UFO orbs, flying in a tight formation, a rare piece of visual evidence in UFO lore. These images would soon become the centerpiece of the entire event. Over the next few days, the lights kept appearing, witnessed not just by these professors or students, but by dozens of residents in Lubbock, including students, housewives, and even some local military personnel who were stationed nearby. The lights were described as moving silently, maintaining formation at high speeds, and flying at a steady, brisk pace, together. They weren't blinking like normal aircraft lights, nor did they have the typical sound that a propeller or jet, which would be easily identified back in 1951, meant they were either something new or your imagination is running wild. Maybe someone spiked the drinks. As news of the sighting spread, the Air Force Project Blue Book took notice. Their job was to take every report and explain it away with some combination of weather phenomena, misidentified conventional aircraft, or good old-fashioned hoaxes. Their official explanation for the Lubbock lights, you ask? Well, they claim the glowing orbs were plovers, small birds whose bellies supposedly reflect the glow of street lights. Yes, according to the Air Force, these birds not only flew in perfect military formation, but also glowed bluish white high in the sky and silently zipped through across the sky at altitudes and speeds that would shame any birdwatcher. This theory was met with widespread skepticism, especially from witnesses and the local media, who found the bird explanation to be about as plausible as a Hollywood script about alien poultry. Dr. 𝐻𝐴𝐸𝐸 himself publicly criticized the Air Force's conclusion, pointing out the numerous eyewitness accounts and photographic evidence that simply didn't match the behavior or appearance of any of the known birds. The plover explanation sounded like a desperate attempt to quell public interest rather than a genuine scientific assessment. Despite the official dismissal, the Lubbock Lights incident remains one of the earliest cases where multiple credible witnesses, including academics and physical evidence, came together in a way that defied easy explanation. It highlighted the growing tension between the government's need to maintain public calm and the genuine mystery surrounding the unexplained aerial phenomena. The Lubbock Lights, with eerie glow and silent flight, remains a classic example of how UFO sightings can go from backyard curiosity to national intrigue, especially when the official explanation seems to come from a different planet altogether. So, if you ever find yourself in West Texas on a quiet August night, keep your eyes peeled. You might just catch a glimpse of a silent V-shaped formation of birds lighting up the sky. And if anyone asks, just tell them it's probably a bunch of rebellious plovers trying to prank the United States Air Force yet again. Since we're on a roll, maybe I'll add a bonus one. We'll go with perhaps, I know, the Portage County Chase of 1966, where police pursued a saucer across Ohio. The Portage County UFO Chase of 1966. It's one of those wild, you can't make this shit up moments in UFO history where law enforcement officers went from routine patrol duty to playing real-life interstellar cops and robbers. Except nobody knew who was the cop, who the hell was the alien. I mean, how do you even give a UFO a speeding ticket anyways? Moving on. It all began on the early morning of April 17th, 1966, near Ravenna, Ohio, when Deputy Dale Spower of the Portage County Sheriff's Department was investigating an abandoned car on a rural road. Just as he was checking out the scene, he noticed a strange glowing object hovering silently above a nearby hilltop. The object he described as a large metallic disc-shaped craft with a smooth surface and a bright light emanating from its underside. Naturally, Deputy Spower did what any level-headed lawman would do. Homie called for backup, hopped in his patrol car, and he chased it. Hell yeah. As he approached the craft, it reportedly moved ahead, leading Spower on a high-speed pursuit spanning over 80 miles across several counties, eventually disappearing near the Pennsylvania border. What started as a routine investigation quickly morphed into an epic interstate UFO chase. Now you would think that is just one man's account. However, along the way, Spower was joined by other local law enforcement officers and even a police chief who reported witnessing the same craft. Witnesses described the object as moving with incredible speed, effortlessly outpacing the police vehicles, yet maintaining a consistent distance from the pursuing cars, almost as if it was enjoying the cat and mouse chase. The craft they were pursuing was said to emit a reddish-orange glow, pulsate softly, and occasionally hover motionless before darting away again. The chase was not just a local curiosity. Radar operators at the Akron-Canton Airport also detected unexplained blips corresponding with the UFO's reported movements, adding an electronic confirmation to the visual sightings. This was serious stuff, not just a backyard camp story. Once news of the incident hit the media, the U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book got involved, dutifully investigating the case with their typical mix of skepticism and understatement. Their final conclusion? According to Blue Book, Deputy Spower and the other officers had mistaken the planet Venus for a UFO. Yes, Venus. The same bright, steady star in the sky that has been visible to humans for millennia, and is pretty much known for not zipping around the sky and leading police cars on highway chases. So, it's hard to imagine a more baffling or more frustrating official explanation. After all, the idea that multiple trained law enforcement officers, backed up by radar confirmation, mistook a stationary celestial body for a glowing craft performing evasive maneuvers at incredible speeds along highways. It's the kind of logic that makes you want to shake your head and ask, bro, are you serious? Well, as for Deputy Spauer himself, he was reportedly shaken by the incident and frustrated by that official dismissal. The whole experience affected him deeply, and he even left law enforcement, unwilling to be part of a system that refused to take his own eyewitness testimony seriously. Meanwhile, UFO enthusiasts and skeptics alike have debated this case for decades. Some suggest it was a secret military test craft. Others think it might have been an extraterrestrial reconnaissance mission. A few even speculate it was a natural atmospheric anomaly. But none of those theories quite capture the sheer drama of police cars chasing a glowing disk across state lines. The Portage County chase remains one of the most compelling cases on record because it was involved with multiple witnesses who had credible backgrounds in law enforcement, radar corroboration, and a dramatic narrative that sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi thriller. Yet the official records treat it as a minor case of celestial misidentification. So, the next time you look up at Venus shining innocently in the sky, remember, according to the government, that bright little dot is perfectly capable of running circles around highway patrol cars. So, soon we'll be closing this episode, but not before moving on to Project Blue Book's legacy. In total, Blue Book investigated 12,618 UFO reports, and like a magician who never learned any tricks, managed to explain away most of them with weather balloons, astronomical misidentifications, or psychological factors. A polite way of saying, you're an idiot, you made it up, or you imagined it. But either way, there are still those 701 cases that remained officially unexplained. A bureaucratic way of saying, we got nothing. While Project Blue Book didn't find aliens, it did find something arguably more terrifying: the limits of our human scientific explanation, and the bureaucracy willing to shrug at them. So, here's my final thoughts from the void. No, Project Blue Book did not find little green men trying to meet our leader, or tall gray dudes probing unsuspecting homies without consent. WTF, bro, not cool. It did not find actual wicked fast silver saucers tearing up random farmers' crops with pretty pictures, or even a government plot to communicate with otherworldly whatevers through cow mutilations. And oh my god, really? But what it did show us is this: we should never stop asking these weird questions. We should never stop looking up. And we should never ever stop pretending a weather balloon looks exactly like a glowing craft doing 4Gs at Mach Jesus over New Mexico. I will finish this episode with a deep dive into the most important duo of Project Blue Book. Let's get into a bit of the details of the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. J. Allen Hynek. For those of you that don't know, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, once a staunch skeptic of UFO phenomena, became one of the most influential figures in the study of misidentified flying objects, transforming from a government consultant to leading advocate for serious scientific inquiry into UFOs. Now, Doc was born in 1910 in Chicago. Hynek was an accomplished astronomer who earned his Ph.D. from the University of Chicago and even taught at Ohio State University, then later at Northwestern. During World War II, he worked on classified projects with the U.S. Navy, but his most public role began in the early 1950s when he was hired by the U.S. Air Force as a scientific advisor for Project Blue Book, a government initiative to investigate UFO sightings. Initially dismissive of the phenomenon, Hynek famously labeled many cases as swamp gas or misidentified celestial objects. But over time, the mounting reports from credible witnesses, military pilots, police officers, and scientists forced him to reconsider. By the 1960s, he began openly criticizing the Air Force's dismissive attitude and lack of scientific rigor. He coined the term close encounters of the third kind to classify interactions with UFOs, and later served as the consultant, believe it or not, Steven Spielberg's film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which brought his work to mainstream attention. In 1973, Hynek founded the Center for UFO Studies, CUFOS, an organization dedicated to collecting and analyzing UFO reports actually scientifically. No swamp gas here, homies. Though he never declared belief in extraterrestrials outright, he strongly advocated for open-minded, empirical investigation and challenged the scientific community to stop treating the topic with ridicule. Until his death in 1986, Dr. Hynek remained a respected academic and a pioneering voice in legitimizing UFO research, earning him a complex legacy as both a debunker and a believer in the explained. Bravo. Finally, let's deep dive into the badass Captain Edward J. Ruppelt. Captain Ruppelt was a pivotal figure in the history of UFO investigations within the U.S. military, remembered for bringing a rare combination of scientific discipline and open-mindedness to the notoriously secretive world of government UFO research. This man was born in 1923 in Iowa. Ruppelt served with distinction in World War II as a decorated bombardier and navigator, earning 5 battle stars and 2 theater combat ribbons. After the war, he studied aeronautical engineering at Iowa State College. This is what prepared him for his future roles in the U.S. Air Force's investigations into UFOs in 1951, where Ruppelt was appointed as the first director of Project Blue Book, the Air Force's well-known investigation program. Under his leadership, Blue Book was transformed from a disorganized and largely dismissive effort into a structured and relatively credible project. Ruppelt emphasized that the use of scientific methodology and encouraged serious analysis of sightings, even coining the term himself, unidentified flying object, to replace the then common flying saucer, aiming for a more neutral and technical label. He worked closely with scientists and consultants, including Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and oversaw the investigation of several major UFO cases. This included the highly publicized 1952 D.C. sightings. Ruppelt's approach brought a level of professionalism to the Air Force's handling of the phenomenon that was largely absent before and after his tenure. After leaving the Air Force in 1953, he worked in the aerospace industry, but remained a central voice in the UFO debate. In 1956, he published the report on unidentified flying objects. This was a candid and critical insider's account of Project Blue Book, which is still considered one of the most important and balanced books ever written on the subject. Although he later expressed skepticism about the extraterrestrial hypothesis, Rupert's commitment to objectivity and transparency left an enduring legacy in the annals of UFO research before his untimely death in 1960 at just 37 years old. Damn. Well, thank you for joining me on this weirdly credible descent into vintage government denial and swamp gas shenanigans. I'm your host, Corey Adam, and this was Echoes of Doubt, where we turn definitely not aliens into very suspicious shrugs. Want to be on the show? Email me at delusionalpodcast@myyahoo.com. Yes, that's a real email. No, I do not regret it. Feel free to also follow me on Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, wherever people argue about aliens with strangers in the comment section. Until next time, keep watching the skies, because clearly someone else already is, allegedly.